Hi, this is Vivian Berkovich with a quick technical note. On the day that I recorded this podcast with Melissa Lantsman, it's wartime here, and our internet and other things weren't working quite the way they usually do. You may notice some sound and other glitches. We've done our best to minimize the effects, but there's only so much we can do. So appreciate your understanding and just wanted to give you a heads up on that. Enjoy the podcast.
You've got a community that is scared about going to school and going to synagogue and going to community centers and living a very normal life in a place where you have a duty to protect people. People literally run away from regimes, like the shitholes of the countries, to get safety and freedom in Canada. And there is an expectation that freedom is afforded to anybody, no matter who you are, what color you are, what language you speak, who you pray to, who you're married to. All of those things don't matter when it comes to protection under the law. And that is not happening for one specific community in this country. And I think the community is tired of the condemnations and the thoughts and prayers and the constant utterances of platitudes like this is not who we are. It's absolutely who we are. It's who we are because you've allowed it to happen for 2.5 years. And it is very much a part of our fabric. And what starts on Saturday with the Jewish people doesn't end there. They come after the Sunday people next.
That is Melissa Lantsman speaking, and she is angry, and rightly so. Melissa Lantsman is the deputy leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. She's a member of Parliament for the riding of Thornhill, a suburb just north of Toronto. And she's an all-round powerhouse who works very closely with Conservative Party leader, the Honourable Pierre Poilievre. If you missed our recent podcast with Poilievre, you may want to watch it now. They're quite a 1-2 punch. State of Tel Aviv and Beyond recorded with both Pierre and Melissa just days after a spree of synagogue shootings in Toronto. And, as it turns out, just before Pierre Poilievre's taping of The Joe Rogan Show in Austin, Texas, which happened on Tuesday, March 17th, just 2 days before I'm recording this. I'm Vivian Berkovich, former Canadian ambassador to Israel. Let's do this. Monday, March 9th. It's about 20 to 7 in the evening in Israel, where I am, which makes it about 20 to 1 in the early afternoon, where you are, Melissa Lantsman, deputy leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. Thank you so much for joining State of Tel Aviv and Beyond today.
Thanks for having me.
You in Ottawa today?
I am in Ottawa. The House is sitting today. We've got a big debate on what's going on your side of the world tonight and the regular rigmarole of Monday in Ottawa.
You now have the privilege of representing the federal riding of Thornhill, which is a riding district, as the Americans would call it, just north of the city limits of Toronto. I'm pretty sure it has the largest percentage in terms of Jewish population in any riding in Canada. Is that right?
That's for sure. And by census, 30-something percent out of what seems to be about 130,000 electors. So a pretty sizable community in Toronto, up and down a corridor that runs through a couple of federal districts, if you will.
Corridor, of course, that you refer to being Bathurst Street, which I like to refer to as the central nervous system of the Jewish community. Melissa, over the weekend, last weekend on Friday night, early in the morning, there were 2 synagogues in Toronto that were shot at, gunfire. And one of them is called the Bayit, which is an acronym for something you can tell us if you wish.
Abraham Yosef of Toronto. You got to know for your listeners who are watching, it's one of the biggest North American Orthodox shuls that there are. And it's like in the central nervous system of my own district in Thornhill.
The other synagogue that was hit, called Shari Shamayim, it's much more centrally located, kind of midtown-ish for Toronto. And then there was a third synagogue that was shot at also last week, just not on Friday night. And it's kind of tucked away in a very affluent neighborhood in the north end of Toronto. And I think it's important to point out before we sort of really get into this that these 3 shootings are not by any stretch the first shootings of Jewish institutions in the Toronto area since October 7th.
No, now Canada holds the record of country where there has been the most shootings into Jewish institutions. Off of memory alone, I can think of 20 incidents of gunshots either into schools or shuls, fire bombings into businesses, into synagogues, vandalizing of windows. And at some point, you need politicians to call it what it is. It's absolute terrorism of a community. The two synagogues that were hit on a Friday night, you could probably, given that it's Friday night and there's less traffic on that Bathurst corridor because of Shabbat, and if you're driving really fast with a heavy foot, you can probably get from one to the other in less than 20 minutes. These things are not random. These synagogues are well known to, in terms of programmatic links, well, massively Zionist synagogues, massive synagogues in terms of the people and the programming that exists there. And ones that have been called out as supporters of Israel. Again, like these things are not random. And we have police informing the public very early in the morning on Saturday saying buildings shot at.
Yeah.
Which is complete and utter, first of all, nonsense. Like a building is where they keep a swimming pool or where office workers. Like this is the central nervous system of a Jewish community. It is where life starts. It is generally where life ends, and is where you have all of those things in between if you're living a Jewish life in Toronto, which obviously many in the diaspora are.
Melissa, I want to just take a moment now and show a clip because you've mentioned this word random so many times, and it resonates with both of us, I think, for good reason. On Saturday morning, the Deputy Chief of Police, Frank Barreto, recorded a video message. I'm not sure what the intent of the message was, but let's show it now and discuss it briefly after. Just a quick note, this clip that we'll be showing you now was recorded and posted by the Deputy Chief of Police in Toronto, which is the fourth largest police force in North America. You can see that Deputy Chief Frank Barreto is cavalier at best, dismissive, one might say, of the rampant violence targeting Jewish people and institutions in that city. And the setting is bizarre. He's very informal. He has an old-style assistant sitting at his elbow, nodding approvingly throughout and taking notes. A bit of a time warp. Here's Deputy Chief of Police in Toronto, Frank Barreto, speaking on Saturday, March 7th, just hours after 2 overnight synagogue shootings in Toronto.
We do not have infinite resources. We could not tomorrow, even if we wanted to, put a police officer on every corner of every corridor that is what we could call a Jewish community area. So we have to be as economical, as efficient as we can. We are, as I said, we are maximizing the deployment. We are drawing police officers away from other work to attend to this. But we cannot shut the entire city down. I mean, and there is a limit. However, it is not lost on us the feeling. I mean, I'm a parent too. One of the questions that was shared with us ahead of this talked about, is it safe to go to synagogues? Is it safe to go to community centers? And made me think of an event maybe 3 years ago. It was awful. It was a 16-year-old boy on the TTC who was stabbed to death randomly by a complete stranger. And I remember my wife talking to me the day after. She said, is it safe for us to let our 16-year-old son, because he was 16 at the time, he actually looked just like the victim, is it safe for us to let him ride the subway? And I was a little bit torn myself because I thought, well, I represent the police, but I cannot guarantee that every subway station will be free from some random attacker, that their, random acts of violence will never affect our family, my son. Am I to tell him to never ride the subway? What kind of a life would I be expecting him to live? And so when I read that question, I thought of my own situation and the fear that I felt, right? And it was a palpable fear, and my wife shared it with me. And ultimately, we thought, we'll train our son best as we can to be vigilant, to look out for himself, to look for signs, but to live his life. Yeah. And to carry on. And in the meantime, police will do everything the police can do, but that falls short of offering a guarantee that I could never offer any community in Toronto. A guarantee. Like, how could I do that?
I watched that probably moments after it was posted on social media. I was shocked by many things. I was shocked by his rather casual, slouching, and informal way of addressing. I was shocked by the way in which he seemed to be rebuking the Jewish community, saying, you don't get any guarantees. We're doing whatever we can. We're going to be efficient, but like there's a limit to what we can do. He actually says that. But most shocking to me was the way he tried to analogize between this random attack on a 16-year-old in the subway 10 or 12 years ago and what happened at these synagogues, suggesting that this was just kind of random violence. Like, what do you want from us? We can't be everywhere all the time. And as you've just said, these attacks were anything but random. And for the last 2.5 years, the Jewish community in Toronto has been terrorized.
Correct.
And nonstop. And I'd like you to comment on, tell us, like, you're living in Toronto, so you're much closer to it than I am. I have strong views about what the police have and have not been doing. What do you see?
Well, first, I want to make a distinction here. There is a separating line between where I represent and the city of Toronto, and those two police responses could not be more different. The two mayors of both those jurisdictions could not be different. I live in a place where the mayor is supportive. He was in front of the synagogue at 7:30 in the morning telling all levels of government that enough is enough. This is unacceptable, and they've got to do the things that they can do to stop this. Our police forces moved in York Region. That's the place I represent. They moved all of the supports around the synagogues, sort of fortified synagogues for Saturday morning in case people had heard about it and were double thinking about going to shul. That response was swift, and those cops are on the phone with all representatives in my neck of the woods immediately by text message saying anything you need. The response could not be more different in Toronto. A mayor who doesn't show up and doesn't show up anytime. If this was gunshots into any other community, into any other sort of community meant to terrorize it, she would be there. And the absolute choice of her not being there should speak volumes to anybody who thinks that she's on their side. And I think the police response, and I would say this to the chief, certainly those officers that were on that tape, like, look, you've got a community that is scared about going to school and going to synagogue and going to community centers and living a very normal life in a place where you have a duty to protect people. People literally run away from regimes. I'm going to say this on your podcast, like the shitholes of the countries to get safety and freedom in Canada. And there is an expectation that freedom is afforded to anybody, no matter who you are, what color you are, what language you speak, who you pray to, who you're married to. All of those things don't matter when it comes to protection under the law. And that is not happening for one specific community in this country. And I think the community is tired of the condemnations and the thoughts and prayers and the constant utterances of platitudes like this is not who we are. It's absolutely who we are. It's who we are because you've allowed it to happen for 2.5 years, and it is very much a part of our fabric. And what starts on Saturday with the Jewish people doesn't end there. They come after the Sunday people next.
Absolutely. And this has been going on not just since October 7th, but it's been, in my view, steadily escalating and becoming more and more violent and more chronic. And it was also in the statement made by the Deputy Chief of Police of Toronto. He referred to the environment in Toronto since the conflict of October 7th. I have never before heard it referred to as the conflict. It was a war. It was an attack on Israel by Hamas, not a conflict. And that's extraordinary, that language. So we will look a little different to our viewers right now because we had a bit of a glitch, an internet glitch, which has been happening during the war here in recent days. So we've changed platforms and resumed on Zoom. We were just really getting going about kind of the difference between Toronto and York Region Police, but in particular, the momentum since October 7th and the kind of increasing violence, volatility, incitement, and the response of Toronto police.
Look, we have laws. They're not being enforced. We have plenty of laws on the books that are being enforced. We have hate marches on a weekly and sometimes more than once a week basis in not in front of consulates and embassies, but in neighborhoods where the population
Yeah.
is predominantly Jewish. That's meant to do one thing, is intimidate and harass people. We have people that are fully masked, cosplaying in our streets. We've got we've got a serious problem in terms of those who have been let into the country. We know of 700 IRGC agents, and those are the ones we know about that are running around in
Right.
Canada, raising, organizing, carrying out the transnational repression and intimidation of both Persian and Jewish communities. And that has escalated since October 7th. And when that escalates, when these marches come to neighborhoods, that becomes violence against institutions. It becomes violence against people. Like, it's not difficult to figure out how this started and where it's going. And I find it rather frustrating, distressing, and completely maddening that so many people in all the levels of government, and I say all of the levels in government, allowing this to happen and watching it and giving thoughts and prayers to a community.
Yeah, and I would suggest even more so emboldening this kind of conduct because right from the beginning, from
100%.
October 7th, Prime Minister Trudeau, he was then Prime Minister, and Prime Minister Mark Carney has only been worse, in my view. They characterize these demonstrations, protests, whatever you want to call them, incitement marches. They characterize them as peaceful protests where people are exercising their constitutional rights to free speech and assembly, which is a load of poppycock because there are no constitutional protections for incitement to violence and hatred, and yet they continue to pretend that this is somehow protected speech. And after Saturday, when there was, for some reason, these shul shootings really seemed to trigger a stronger reaction than usual. The chief of police actually showed up to one of the synagogues to make a very solemn statement, and they're saying, "Oh yes, we're going to do this, that, and whatever."
Well, I'm gonna disagree with you here. Like, I don't think it was a stronger reaction. I think it was exactly the same. It was the same reaction as you always got. You got the statement on Twitter, you got a press conference in front of a synagogue, but it lacks, the things that you can actually do. There's not a single dollar more of funding for security for those institutions, which, by the way, I'm looking at a bill right now that somebody had sent me because I was curious. $3,900 for paid duty officers for a couple weeks of Shabbat in another synagogue in my area. The cameras, the physical security, like there is so much red tape in those programs. You've got to deal with that stuff before these attacks happen. There's been nothing in terms of getting the terrorists that now call Canada a safe haven, who call it home, who study here, who work out in gyms, who eat in fancy restaurants, who own real estate here. There's been one person that has been kicked out of this country, and we know that we have many more here. So pardon me for not thinking that response is adequate, but I don't care that you're gonna show up at a synagogue. There is nothing different today than there was this weekend before the shooting started.
So you're much closer to it. I hear you absolutely that this is just another typical reaction. And what are people, you're there, you're living there, you're in touch with the mood, but what are Jewish people feeling on the ground? How are people feeling about their day-to-day lives?
So, two different responses. I think one is the obvious anger. It's kind of like the fight or flight response. You have a good section of the community that really needs to show up and fight this and demand protection and not have their resolve of being an active Jewish person in Canada quashed by the terror that they're seeing. And then there's the other side of it. People that are genuinely afraid. They don't know what to tell their kids. They don't know whether it's the decision for their family to go to these events, whether it's a holiday, a festival, a rally, a concert, swimming lessons, whatever it is in sort of the enclave of the Jewish community. They're not sure if it's safe. And as an MP, like it's a difficult conversation to have. I'm always on the fight side. The second that this terror and this intimidation changes your behavior is the second the other side wins. And I'm going to be the last one standing here fighting the fight to get the government to actually protect this community, because this has become a domestic Canadian problem. One that puts communities in deep peril.
Melissa, the laws, as you've said, and as we both know, simply are not being enforced. Jews are not being protected under the law. They are not being treated equally and receiving protection. And in Canada, everybody has become an instant jurisdictional expert. We have all these levels of government. But in my view, and this has been my view for over 2 years now, this is a national security issue. This is not about the mayor of Toronto or the mayor of Vaughan, or this is a national security issue. We have the precedent, which was an absurdity, of the Emergencies Act being invoked to deal with the truckers' protests and convoy because they were honking horns and doing other things that angered people. But we're talking about ongoing chronic criminal code violations and violence targeting the Jewish community. And the federal government has yet to really step up and do anything. And over the last weekend, I'm sure you're aware that Minister of Foreign Affairs Guidon Sarr, I gather he probably initiated a phone call with Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs Anita Anand, in which he raised his concerns about the lack of security, the lack of protection, the lack of concern for Canada's Jews. And the only reason we know about this phone call is because Guidon Sarr put out a notice on social media. Anita Anand, as I pointed out to her on X today, did not. I can only imagine what the discussion went like. What do you know? Anything? Or what do you suspect?
No, I know exactly what you know, and that's from I followed the Twitter feed of the minister as well. I had the pleasure of meeting with him when I happened to be there on a personal trip in December, and he raised similar issues. Frankly, everybody that I had met with in Israel within the government apparatus raised similar issues. And it's just sort of a sad situation where you're there to talk about you're there as the connection point between a government that has overtly said that they're going to arrest the prime minister of your country and recognized a state that doesn't exist without calling them a state sponsor of terror, which they are in terms of the of what Canada sees as Palestine now. I can only imagine that the conversation is one of just the minister completely being at his wits end. Like, he's obviously got a lot of Israelis living in Canada. He's worried about that population. That's exactly what the minister should be worried about. And I think that he's shown concern for what the community's been screaming about, and rightfully so, for 2.5 years now. I haven't seen anything from Anand though.
And what do you say, Melissa, in response to people who are like, "But out of our business. This is a domestic Canadian issue. Why are you, a foreign affairs minister from a foreign country, sticking your nose in our affairs?" What do you say to
Look,
them?
I'm a Canadian politician. I'm always going to speak about the situation here first, but it's being noticed around the world, and there's no getting around that. I would say that the government should concern itself with the protection of all communities. Again, no matter where you're from, or when you got here, or where you live, or what color your skin is, like, none of that should matter when it comes to freedom and protection under the law, which is the government's responsibility. They have abdicated now for 2.5 years.
I know you've got to run into the house now, Melissa. You've got a question period coming up.
It's coming up. It's an hour. If your listeners are watching, it's an hour of the day where we get to ask the government the tough questions. But it's called question period, not answer period. So stay tuned for that.
That was good. I know that you're in Ottawa. You're going to be in the House in question period, as we were discussing, but not answer period. And do you know if the Prime Minister will be there? And do you have any foreknowledge as to whether or not this issue with respect to attacks on Jews in Canada is on the agenda for question period?
Well, I need to bring it up in question period today. We also have a debate on the situation of Iran, and for me in the community, what I didn't tell you is that I also represent a sizable Persian community in the east part of where I represent, and certainly swells into North Toronto in the very same way as the Jewish community. And we're having a debate tonight that I know the Prime Minister won't be there for. At least that's what I've read in the paper. Hopefully, after having 4 positions in 4 days, he might want to clarify his position on where Canada stands in all of this.
Yeah, no, he's basically made it clear that he has no position and no idea what his position should be. But he did make a point of posting on social media again today that he had a lovely chat with the Prime Minister of Lebanon. So he has now made direct contact with the leaders of Qatar, Lebanon, and the UAE. He has not made any contact with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu or other leaders in the region.
We have a parliamentary democracy, and I think the Prime Minister owes the country, his own caucus, media who has been hounding him, really an explanation to Parliament about where Canada stands on the issue, what has been requested of Canada, where Canada is actually going to help in this. But we're going to focus on what we can actually control. As Conservatives, we can control a whole lot of energy from this country, making it available to our allies that need it in order to, again, put Iran in the corner that they do, so that the people of Iran can get the regime change that they deserve and have deserved for 47 years now, and see a democracy of the sun shining and the lion roaring like it's always been, one of the greatest civilizations back to its rightful place on earth.
Indeed, and thousands of years of very strong connection in every way between Persians and Jewish people, which I think that too many Westerners don't understand. The very deep and profound ties between these two peoples. Because you raised oil, I have to ask you, is Canada providing China with oil at this juncture? Because the Chinese connection to Iran is a very important one.
Yeah, look, it's a question I think for the government of the day. What I can say is that we have enough resources to power us and the world for generations. We have it beneath our feet. Everybody in Europe wants it. They've wanted it for a long time, and it's up to us to not squander the opportunity to really play an outsized role in the world of providing that good, clean, moral Canadian energy to those that need it. So we're going to keep pushing on that, making sure that we can unlock our resources, take it to market, and look, at the end of the day, give good paying jobs to Canadians.
My concern was more immediate and arising from Prime Minister Carney's visit to China in December. My understanding is that there were assurances given to China with respect to providing oil at that time.
Again, who can control what we can control here? I don't know what the Prime Minister said on his trip behind closed doors, but I think Canadians expect that we are resilient and we stand on our own 2 feet. We're not going to control the president of the US. We're not going to control the war in the Middle East. We're not going to control the large hand of China all over the world, but we can control the destiny of Canada, and we have a lot to offer the world. I'm going to say one more thing to everybody who's watching. Stay safe. And I want you to know that there are lots of Canadians who think about you every single day. And the very fact that you are on the precipice of freedom and democracy in a region that hasn't had it for a very long time. And we know that you are at the gates of protecting Western democracies everywhere.
Thank you for that, because I have to say it's been a pretty rough 10 days, and we've got lots more to come. Really appreciate that. Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks so much.
Shortly after my interview with Melissa Lantsman, she did that day what she always does in the House of Commons and delivered some very powerful, direct questions to the Liberal government led by Prime Minister Mark Carney. As usual, the government dodged and weaved and did anything but respond in a meaningful way. After question period, Lantsman spoke to the media in the halls outside the parliamentary chamber, and she demanded action. This was on Monday, March 9th. She demanded an actual plan from the government to address the abandonment of Canada's Jews. The law in Canada protects them as well, she reminds everyone, but the federal government must demonstrate leadership and a will to enforce the law. They have done the exact opposite when it comes to Canadian Jews. Here is Deputy Conservative leader Melissa Lantsman schooling the government on their basic duty to protect all citizens, including Jews.
There have always been conflicts abroad, and rarely have we seen them spill into our streets the way that we have since this Liberal government has been in power. We now know from the Iranian community right across the country, from many others, that there are hundreds of IRGC agents presently on Canadian soil, using Canada as a safe haven to organize and to fundraise and to terrorize diaspora communities right here at home. We have seen now critics of the Iranian regime from out west, an investigation now being treated as a homicide, somebody who is critical of that regime. We see constantly, and particularly as an MP from a region who represents many in that community, on a weekly basis, those calls coming into our office, informing MPs and at all levels of government, including authorities, that they are terrified of living within their own communities. The hundreds of agents that are here today live in Canada with complete impunity, and we have a Liberal government that has done absolutely nothing
to stop it. We've seen violence against businesses, gunshots into Iranian activist businesses. We've seen terrorism in the Jewish community. We now are amongst nations that lead the world in attacks against Jewish institutions. Today we are calling on the government to table a plan to get rid of these terrorists that are on Canadian soil.
The Public Safety Minister today on the 700 IRGC members number. He's disputing the number, though he's not quite telling us what the government's number is. He does say that 700 is a larger number that includes entities and family members of IRGC members. What do you make of that?
Look, we have heard for a long time in this country from human rights groups in the Iranian community, which was then put forward and verified by different media. If the number isn't 700, then the minister ought to tell Canadians, and we need to know, all Canadians need to know what that number is. We know that the minister was talking about 28 inadmissible. We also know that there's 239 people who have had their visas revoked, making them inadmissible. And we know the most important number is that they have expelled only one. So we're calling on the minister to actually get to work. That number of 239 was actually from his own department, the department that he controls, and he's failed to expel Iranian regime activists from this country. We're calling on him to table a plan within a week in this House of Commons to tell Canadians how he's going to get rid of the terrorists that are terrifying our communities.
Prime Minister Mark Carney? Silence. He's busy, as always, flitting around Europe and the globe, talking a lot about how effective he is, but he is yet to demonstrate that with anything. Canada is sinking, and fast. And Prime Minister Carney is busy pretending that our economy is surging, that we are able to defend ourselves militarily, and that all this fuss about anti-Semitism is, a lot of fuss about nothing, it would seem, because he doesn't even deem it worthy to address. Last week, the Carney government did announce a package of $10 million for the Canadian Jewish community to build higher walls around their community centers and schools and synagogues. Higher walls and fortify and hide. But that's not a solution. It's not what we want. We want the law to be enforced to protect us, just as it would be enforced to protect any other community in Canada. And $10 million for this government is an insulting pittance. This is not about money. This is about upholding the law. For more on that particular issue, I get into that in the episode with the Honorable Pierre Poilievre. Maybe have a look at that or listen if you haven't yet. Thanks for being here, and please, if you have not done so already, consider supporting us with a paid subscription at stateoftelaviv.com or buy me a coffee. You'll find all the information in the podcast notes or at our website, stateoftelaviv.com. We're independent, we work hard, and we need your support to continue to deliver this content. Thank you for considering this request, and that's a wrap for today. Until next time. We love hearing from you, so please comment on our website, stateoftelaviv.com, or send us a note to vivian@stateoftelaviv.com. That's VIVIAN @stateoftelaviv.com. And if you go to our website, stateoftelaviv.com, you can find the subscribe button and take it from there. Hope that you do that. On behalf of the State of Tel Aviv core team, Jan Zabo, our creative, graphic, visual, and marketing man, Amir White, producer and editor extraordinaire, sound guy, who is also impressively patient with me and my boomer tech deficiencies, and our social media manager who pitches in on everything. Thank you, Maya Naftalin. Thanks to the team, and thank you, listeners, for being here. Until next time, stay safe.